Hello, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back. I think we're going to bring this chapter to a close, in this video today. We've got like 3 more questions we're going to run through. So, Scott, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
How are you?
great, great. Yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm enjoying kind of just like going deep into these questions, to be honest, We're on number 8, you were telling me. Will we kick that off? Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
How can the universe exist in consciousness if consciousness arose billions of years after the Big Bang? So this is one I totally get. There was a few questions earlier where I wasn't like, I was like, I don't know whether that's as popular, but I get this. So we're saying that all is consciousness, right? Everything that exists, the entire universe is nothing but merely consciousness, all that is. And then it would be a fair point to say, like, yeah, cool, okay, but like, didn't the universe like get born 13 point whatever billion years ago? And then like, how come the universe can exist in like consciousness? How can the universe exist in consciousness if consciousness arose billions of years after the Big Bang?
So
You
this
know?
question gets to the idea that materialism is just part of the air that we breathe in the world
Mm-hmm.
today, and we don't even notice it. And so this question comes from that misunderstanding of the nature of the world. And if you assume that the world is this material thing outside of you that arose for 13 billion years prior to the formation of the earth and so on,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a valid point to say, well, consciousness must have arose much more recently, and we only know of the human species as the only intelligent life in the universe that we know of. And so this whole idea that consciousness is the ground of being seems absurd from that particular viewpoint. But what we're asking people to do is have a huge figure ground shift, which is much more vast than I think most people are prepared for. And we're saying that all is consciousness. That includes the universe. So consciousness predates the universe. It comes before space and time. Okay. And so
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense now that the universe arose in consciousness because it's all a work of imagination in this vast, infinite consciousness with infinite capacity that has, it's able to imagine every atom and every bit of complexity in the entire visible universe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so we're viewing this from a very limited perspective of being an individual human, um, kind of being blown away by the vastness of the universe and everything. And
Yeah.
that's natural to kind of be like staggered by the vastness of space and of time and of the number of stars in the universe and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I'm trying to get to with this philosophy is to show you this alternative viewpoint, which has all of that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's a product of mental activity of a much more vast mind. Just
Mm-hmm.
like your inner life is a product of your own individual mind, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
experiences that you have day to day are
Mm-hmm.
internal to you, right? And we
Yeah.
can't probe those. We can't see them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling now, but I think
Yeah,
I
no. I
probably
tell you
answered
what,
the
I'm
question.
letting you ramble on purpose because,
Yeah.
like, actually, these question 8 and 9 for me are very linked, actually, and it's something that speaks very closely to my own training in transpersonal psychology. And what I'd like to do is, could we go straight to question 9 and kind of bring these two together
Yeah.
because I have a few things to say on it, and I think they're very interlinked, actually. So can I call out question 9? It's like, if consciousness is not generated by the brain, how come probing the brain correlates strongly with inner experience? Okay. And so I am, my primary teacher in this whole journey with understanding consciousness has been Stanislav Grof, and he's a guy that I've really taken on his entire model quite explicitly, actually, you know, and it really works for me. But he would be a subscriber to that all is consciousness. And what does that mean? You know, so it's almost like the way I look at it is like, if consciousness is everything, right, then the entire universe, including the Big Bang and everything that came since the Big Bang, is just a tiny occurrence happening in a much bigger, vast, infinite sphere of consciousness, you know. So this universe is just a tiny little whimsical happening in consciousness, you know, and consciousness supersedes everything. The Big Bang and anything that came before the Big Bang, all is consciousness.
Let
And
me just
so
jump in there a second and say
yeah,
that mathematically that's easily expressed, that awareness or consciousness is infinite,
yeah,
and the entire universe, even though it's very big and full of complexity, is finite.
finite,
And
yes,
so
exactly,
there's an infinity of more space out there, more
yeah,
it's unimaginably vast.
yeah.
This
And in
idea of awareness.
intuitively, I don't know, like this, it probably is a lofty concept we're talking about, but intuitively I've always just found this one easy, to be honest. I've always just felt, yeah, like of course that's obviously the deal, you know. But I've it's taken me some time to learn that not many people feel like that. Actually, a lot of people, it's quite foreign to feel like that,
And
but
it,
that's a different
yeah,
thing.
and a lot of
But
times people need to take like small steps to get to
yeah,
this viewpoint, I think, and
mm,
especially if they were really indoctrinated in the dominant paradigm. Let's say that
yeah,
they're a scientist, then they have, like, professionally they probably can't admit to this, but like personally they might resonate with such a way of looking at things,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we're in this kind of weird point in history where we're like half the scientists are actually looking beyond materialism, but they can't
yeah.
really say that
And they can't admit it.
officially,
God loved them.
you know.
But
Yeah.
listen, just to so this idea of like, if consciousness is not generated by the brain, right? How come probing the brain correlates strongly with inner experience? So this is the idea that like consciousness is nothing but, it's reduced to nothing but, it's like an epiphenomenon of brain activity, as Stan refers to it, right?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit crude, but he says like, you know, the current scientific understanding of consciousness is that somehow, and nobody in the world can tell you how, by the way, but somehow consciousness is excreted by the brain in a similar way to the kidneys excrete urine, right? It's just a biological byproduct of brain activity, you know?
And
And I
some
was like,
philosophers think it might even be an illusion,
oh,
because of studying brain tissues. They can't find the consciousness in there. It's just a bunch of
yeah,
parts. So how could consciousness arise out of a bunch of short-circuited neural pathways?
yeah, yeah.
You
And
know,
it's a bit like,
where is the person in there?
yeah,
Yeah, and so, but it's fair enough, because in science you're studying the visible world, and
mhm,
you're looking very deeply into the brain, into all the mechanisms there, and you just kind of conclude, well, maybe it's just this epiphenomenon that's excreted, you know,
yeah,
maybe. Um, but I think that reality is much more vast than just the visible world, and that's
mhm,
why I think that the brain is the visible version.
mhm,
It's kind of like a switchboard that is
mhm.
tuning in to your mind, which is not
You got,
invisible.
you got it.
And so that's in your soul. And so
Yeah,
that your soul is inhabiting your body and interacting with it. And so even your thoughts are coming from this invisible domain, because
yes,
even with all of our tech, we can't say, well, there's a thought. There,
yeah,
he's thinking about apples. No, we have
yeah.
no a way to do that. We have no way to check that with by studying the physical brain, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I put the analogy in here of Netflix. So
Okay.
let's
I
say,
love this.
yeah,
Yeah.
so let's say we're probing the brain, and we're with a little electrical stimulator in surgery, and they're mapping out the brain. You know, they're saying,
Mhm.
oh, I poke here, and the guy, and you remember being on a playground on a swing. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so that's must be where that is stored, right? And so that in the very first days of neuroscience, that's kind of how they were mapping things out generally. But they made the assumption that consciousness is in this physical meat of the brain. And it's like probing a TV circuit and with like a multimeter, and you're like touching things inside the TV, and you're like, oh, I touch here and look at that. We get all this interference on the screen. And I touch over here and we get compression artifacts. And here it just totally interrupts the show. So the show must be in the TV. That's their assumption, right? It's very literal. It's a total literalist approach that it must be in the TV. And I mean, that's the first assumption. But then, wait a minute, Netflix is streaming to your TV. The show isn't in there. It's not in the wire. It's much more complicated than that. Okay, and we all know that. But why don't we take this wonderful analogy of our age, which is so important, television shows, streaming, and apply that to our physiology? Say, wait a minute, maybe it's like that. Maybe there's this whole invisible side that we can't see and weigh and measure. And that can be frustrating because we can't understand it really with the tools of science. But we can see its presence. It's sort of like gravitational lensing, where we see the starlight kind of stretched out in a distant place. And it's because there's a really massive object there that we can't see that's bending the light around it. We can see its effects, but we can't see it directly. Okay, so I think that's where, when we look at the brain, we're seeing the effects of mind. We're not seeing it directly. We'll never be able to pin down a single thought and say this is where the thought came from, because it's not in the visible world.
I find when I'm hosting any workshop, or giving a talk, I have one slide that kind of sort of, it's like my full disclosure slide, if you like, where I kind of go like the materialist perspective, is like, every consciousness is an epiphenomenon of brain activity. And I sort of say, this is a worldview that I don't subscribe to, and then the transpersonal view is like consciousness is commensurate with all that is, or something like that, and I go part B, section 2, this is what I do subscribe to, and I have a William James quote, that like there's layers of consciousness that we can tune into. But I'm loving your Netflix analogy, because it reminds me of another great teacher, Ram Dass, who does this brilliant rendition of having a little television tuner on your temple of your head, and that you're able to actually turn the dial. And by turning the dial, the sort of the way you see the world changes,
because he's an older generation and grew up with the dial and the click, And exactly. And I grew up, in my earliest childhood, we had a TV like that. You turn the channels, right?
Exactly. No, it's kind of here. My sort of like, intuitive disposition is one of this strong feeling that everything is consciousness, and that somehow we're interwoven as humans, into this particular experience. We're interwoven into this infinite tapestry of consciousness. And we then sort of like get to experience this infinite tapestry through the lenses of this human, setup for this incarnation or whatever, and that's just always been the way I've looked at it, to be honest, that everything is consciousness, and we're only seeing it through this limited human perspective, which is infinitesimal in terms of even just the material vastness of the universe, like being one human on one planet around one star in one solar system.
Well, let's take it a step further, shall we? And that is the last question here. Which is there more to consciousness than being an individual person?
Beautiful.
So you were just describing your experience as an individual person. But there is more to consciousness. And in a way, maybe the best thing for me to do is read this quote from Rupert Spira, and we can talk about it.
Lovely.
So he says, all we know is experience, but there is no independent we or I that knows experience. There is just experience or experiencing. And experiencing is not inherently divided into one part that experiences and another part that is experienced.
Mm.
And so he's pointing out what I would call enlightenment, which is that
Mm-hmm.
there is no I. There is really no person there. There
Mm-hmm.
is only consciousness
Mm.
in truth. Okay, so there's no Scott, there's no Geoff, there's only consciousness
Mm.
floating all of the boats.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's true. That's ultimately pure truth right there. Okay,
Yeah.
but it's hard to reside in that because we have our mundane considerations, our practical considerations. We have to act like an individual, you know, and it's good to remind yourself a little bit. And this is actually frightening to some. That wait a minute, are you saying I'm an illusion? Well, in a
Yeah.
sense, you are, just like the Earth is, or
The
the
spoon.
universe is. You're just as much of an illusion as all of that. So rest
Mm-hmm.
assured that you're on the same level of reality as everything can possibly be. But really, there is no individual consciousness in you. There's only consciousness. You
Mm-hmm.
have an individual boundary which defines who you think you are. But that's because
Mm-hmm.
awareness enters that boundary and is under this illusion that that must be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like suddenly infinite awareness has a bound around it, a
Mm-hmm.
finite
Yeah.
bound, and it's like, oh, this must be who I am. I'm this
Rupert
person
calls it
called Scott. Oh, I guess so.
finite mind.
But that
Isn't
that
that?
is an illusion, right?
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I must be this guy named Scott
Yeah.
who has this
Yeah.
history and all this stuff. Well, that's true right now,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also um, true that consciousness is also Geoff and everybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
You know? So we're playing this game with ourself of creating all of these points of view. It's like the ultimate video game, and we
Mm.
get to be all these different characters.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to take it seriously, and we have to kind of forget that we're playing a game, or it wouldn't be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, really,
Yeah.
that's like when you go into a movie and sit down in the theater, you forget that you're in this smelly theater with
Yeah. Yeah.
you allow yourself to be swept away by this experience. And I think that's
Mm.
what life is all about. The
Mm-hmm.
consciousness allows itself to be swept up with this embedded quality of taking these different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's much more to consciousness than an individual person. It's an absurd question in a way to think that you're just
Yeah.
this individual person. I mean, wow, that's staggeringly um, parochial, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, I mean, to give ourselves an easy time, like it is our experience, as we're born and we grow, there are certain stages of the growth process, both physically and psychologically, where you are boundaried. We do have a skin encapsulated ego, psychologically, we are connected to our families, our friends, our peers. And so, in order to exist in this reality, those boundaries are kind of necessary, if you like. I think where it becomes
Absolutely.
problematic is that when you forget that that's not all that is, it's not, that's not the only reality, you see. And then it actually gets tricky because I love that stream analogy, right? So there's this infinite stream, and then there's these finite bounded units of consciousness in the stream, the whirlpools. So there's one little whirlpool that's Scott Onstott in Canada. You're just floating in the infinite stream of consciousness, that's never begun and never ends. And then there's another little whirlpool, floating in Ireland. That's Geoff, floating temporarily in this infinite stream of consciousness. And from the perspective of the whirlpool of the finite mind of Geoff or the finite mind of Scott, we it's hard actually to fully see the world from infinite consciousness's perspective. As long as we're kind of um looking out from this kind of dualistic reality, the finite self, it kind of sounds a bit mad. It's like, what are you talking about? There's only consciousness, but it's, I believe only in kind of expanded states of consciousness where something happens, where those boundaries begin to dissolve and you experience yourself connected or connected to something much, much bigger than the little you. And it's kind of really hard to articulate that experience, because the minute you start putting words on it, you've lost it again, So I really believe that it's like only through experiencing that in whatever way is that meaningful for the individual, and everybody's different in how they're going to experience it, that you come into some sort of harmony with being able to ease into, oh my God, like there only is awareness. It's all there is, there's all there is. And I'm still on my journey with that, because we were speaking earlier in one of our videos. I like me, I'm attached to this finite mind. I don't want this guy to just go boof and dissolve back into all that is in awareness,
It's like, wait, I thought this was a self-help course, and you're telling me there is no self? How can we help that? It's not possible, right?
Yeah. And like,
yeah,
I mean, ultimately it's a mystery to me, like I in my, moments of peak experiences, like I've definitely touched something that's brought me way beyond the little me. And it's like, there's a quality of peace and calm and tranquility and a sense of not needing to add anything anymore to myself. It's almost like this remembering that everything that I need, desire, want is already in abundance within me. And it's like, I get this glimpse of, I innocently forgot that for my whole life. And now I just get this glimpse of remembering, oh my God, like I am already complete. So
well,
is everybody
and
else.
I think that this journey that we're describing in this quote that Rupert Spira wrote, and this concept of enlightenment, is sort of about transcendence. It's about realizing who you really are.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
that is. But
Yeah.
that's only half of the truth. The other
Yeah.
half is that you are also an individual human having this experience right now in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to honor that as well,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that is the end point of this incredible dream of all of this complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And to think that you just want to get out of here is to miss the entire point
Yeah.
of all of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So there's this idea of transcendence and immanence. So immanence is like coming back home
Mm-hmm.
to live your human life as an individual. But
Mm-hmm.
you never would appreciate it unless you'd made the journey out and transcended everything.
Yeah.
Then you can come back again.
Yeah.
And then you become really enlightened, in a sense that you've taken the hero's journey, you've completed the circle,
Mm-hmm.
but now you're at a higher level
Yeah.
of
And you,
understanding. Yeah.
yeah, you're right on track. And you return once again to where you started, and everything is the same and nothing is the same. It's
Yeah,
that one,
exactly. Yeah.
it's like, and it's that idea of like being in the world and not of the world, or, before enlightenment, the chop wood one, isn't it? And then after enlightenment, chop wood. But I think what that means for me is, when you do get the privilege of experiencing some kind of expanded state of consciousness, which brings you close, by the way, just for the record, I'm definitely not enlightened, nowhere near it. So just in case there's any illusion, I've got another 100,000 lifetimes till I get there, but like my greatest passion is trying to explore these kind of like opportunities to break through the boundary of my limited self into something bigger than who I am. And it's probably the most fulfilling experiences that I've enjoyed, like in this incarnation, And so then there's the whole pitfall of then longing for those and then getting attached to those and then becoming addicted to wanting those experiences, and that whole that's a contradiction in sort. So it's a crazy trip, you know. But I just wanted to make the point that somehow when you do get the gift of feeling connected to something bigger, and then you come back into your world, you know, and you're having dinner with your wife, and you know, you're having a conversation in the regular mundane world, there's a depth that comes back with you, and you realize that you're not as separate from your loved ones as you once were. You're not even as separate from every other being on the planet, animals, all life forms. And there's this sense of, you get plugged into that interconnectedness that geometry is so beautiful in illustrating. And it's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling to go, wow, like, you know, there's far less separation.
And having taken this trip with us through this book, you have cognitively gone on this hero's journey, and you've surveyed a lot of territory here, you know, a lot that we've mapped out, and hopefully you come back around and you have less of a literal take on everything, and you start to open to the subtleties, the beauty of it all. You start to appreciate things in a new way. At least that's my experience. You know, having explored a lot, it just deepens my appreciation for the mundane life that I live. And it gives me just a slightly changed perspective. And it's amazing how subtle that is. But it's really all about a little bit of a perceptual shift. And it makes all the difference. It gives you hope. It makes you excited to get out of bed in the morning. It's just an entirely different worldview that you start to have when you see the things in this way. Would you agree with that, Geoff?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's kind of, I'm you know, I definitely put time and effort into trying to create settings for myself that are conducive to sort of moving beyond my boundaried finite mind, right? And I do, like, that's where I do all these workshops. I create all these sand mandalas with that specific intent. And I just like to say, there's kind of like, there's a part of me that wills myself to have these higher experiences, you know, so I can kind of go to a lovely retreat center. I can bring my sacred geometry boards. I can bring all my sands and my lovely Tibetan tools. And I can kind of have the intention that I'm going to break through to some higher interaction with a larger awareness. But the little me can never make it happen. It's kind of, this is really interesting to me, you know. It's not like something that I can just go and go, right, I'm going to have a, you know, peak experience and connect with all that is. It's almost like, if the elements line up correctly, and I don't know how that happens, something comes in that has nothing to do with me, that lifts me up. You know, despite all my efforting and toiling, you know, it's this graceful arising that comes in and sort of lifts me out of myself, if you like, you know. And then the impact that has then when I return to the world is this kind of residual sense of feeling at ease with myself and the surroundings, feeling reassured that there is, you know, an intelligence holding it all together that I can trust, you know. And that's very reassuring for me, you know. And then at times, I sometimes like, I can be a bit manic, you know, because sometimes it's like it's all coming on and the universe is speaking to me and I'm thinking things internally and then manifesting externally and wonderful coincidences and stuff lining up, you know. But then at other times I'll slip back down the slope into the mundane, and I won't be as plugged in or tapped in or connected to all of the sort of infinite beauty and interactions. And so it's like a waveform for me, you know. It's like at times I'll hit some low points, and not low points like as in, thankfully I don't suffer too much with low moods or anything like that. But you know, I do get stuck in the grind of life, you know, that just by being in the mundane world, without those kind of like glimpses to the peaks, I can get a little bit like stuck, you know. So I don't want to sort of like present this journey as like this sort of like great awakening that has you changed every moment of your life, but it's more like a waveform that you surf, you know, and you can kind of like engage in this process where you're happy when the wave lifts you up above it all, you know, and when you slide back down, you never really lose sight of those peaks, you know they're there, you felt them and know that they're available again. And it's that kind of knowing allows you ride back up the wave again, something like that. Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah, I love it. It's this interplay between the sacred and the mundane that we can't
Yeah,
ever eliminate. It's definitely kind of baked into reality,
yeah,
this
yeah.
kind of this give and take between transcendence and immanence that
Hmm.
that is unavoidable. And I think it's
Yeah,
probably wise just to accept it and go with it, go with the current,
yeah,
flow with it. And it it makes it easier when you've done it a few times and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going down into my shadow side, or I'm going down into my mundane persona here because I have a lot of work to do,
or the material is getting sticky again, the
or
material realm is
crisis is
kicking me
happening,
down.
or something like
Yeah.
that, and
Hmm.
I don't want to talk about philosophy right now. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
because you're
yeah,
dealing with it, right?
yeah,
But then
shit is hitting the fan.
there'll come another time, hopefully, where you'll go back up to the peak and you'll be like, oh
Hmm.
my God, this is so beautiful. And
Hmm.
it gives you a new appreciation
Hmm.
for kind of having to go through the mud.
Yeah, yeah.
Because what
And
would
it's
it be if you
also,
were always at the peak? You wouldn't you wouldn't have that opposite polarity to give life meaning.
yeah, yeah,
So it's just part of the experience.
yeah, yeah. It's the dance of life. And also there is something beautiful about it that like it only takes one, you know, peak beyond the veil or whatever, one breakthrough, one dissolving of the finite boundary, or the Geoff self, that boundary dissolves and you get connected to something bigger. You can never undo that experience. It's total red pill stuff, to use the Matrix analogy, you know, that
You
you,
can't unsee that
yeah,
vision.
exactly.
It's happened.
And
Yeah.
so that's what's beautiful. And the more you do it, then the more kind of like reassurance you get, the more confidence you get, the more you grow into being at home with the world being in this, appear like holding this new worldview. The more you're able to, it becomes more part of just who you are. It's a bit more effortless, you
I think
know.
it allows you, it gives you kind of an anchor in a way through this storm of chaos that's going to rack you again and again.
You
But
got it.
you have this lifeline or anchor analogy. You
Mm,
have something holding you, um,
that you can
um,
trust.
and yeah, and giving you this grounding, this
Mm,
trust. Yeah, I
mm,
think geometry is this wonderful vehicle for that.
mm-hmm.
That is very grounding because it's true,
Yeah.
beautiful, and good. And
Mm.
that's what we need to
Yeah.
remind ourselves of sometimes when we're in the midst of chaos and
We're
suffering.
very lucky.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're very lucky to have found it, I have to say.
yeah.
You know, like we really are. It's such a gift. Um, but look, maybe what we'll do is we'll close on that, Scott, will we? Because I'm looking forward to doing a wrap-up chapter on chapter 9, where we're going to kind of bring it all together and kind of lay out, you know, transformation is the title of the chapter. But we're going to speak a little bit more about, like, you know, what actually happens when you embark upon a journey of sacred geometry. Like what are the real deep fruits of the endeavor? That's going to be an enjoyable chapter to dive into. So let's leave that to the closing chapter. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you for chapter 9 in the next video. Thank you.